Thank you, Mate. We'll have you back on stage momentarily, but first, a special announcement and special pairing up here. To further expand upon our conversations about autonomy and AI and its impact on the future of mobility, we're pleased to have a special a duo in conversation here to discuss the newly released MIT Kearney report on AI and mobility. And to have that conversation here and explain the results of the report are Dr. Christian Gasparic, who's the global lead at Kearney Advanced Mobility Institute, and John Moavenzadeh, who is the executive director of the MIT Mobility Initiative. Gentlemen, please come on out.
So I would like to thank the event organizers first for putting us in a great spot to follow Mate. We'll try to do him justice to be 5% visionary. We'll do our best. The silver lining is you will get him back as promised. So we indeed, I'm not sure if this is coming up. I was a bit too excited there. So indeed, we are very happy to launch a report. You can see the QR code here. It's available now. It's a result of a quite intense collaboration with John and the team from the MIT Mobility Initiative and the Kearney Advanced Mobility Institute. Have a look. AI is one of those heavily overused words these days, as you all well know. So we thought, why not get properly to the bottom of that? So this is what we'll try to do today. We have 14 minutes. One is already passed, so we'll try to be on the clock. We will do it in 4 segments. John and I will share the speakership here. First, we'll try to pitch the idea why this is relevant to look at it properly now. We will then make some sense of what AI is in mobility. We'll look at some use cases in the practice, and then we'll take some takeaways from this. So if we start. Firstly, let's get back fundamentally to what mobility is solving for. And there are really 3 dimensions. I mean, you've seen it probably in this one way or the other many times before: safety, sustainability, inclusivity. And for decades, at least, mobility has been trying to get better in these dimensions. The first one is safety. It's quite obvious. If you look at the statistics, we still have more than 1 million mobility-related fatalities in the year. Obviously, it's not the end of where we want to go. In sustainability, we as mobility actually are a good contributor because we help people get around efficiently, but also there is a gap towards net zero, as you can see from the numbers. And then the one that I was personally most surprised about, vulnerable groups, those at the lower end of the income spectrum, actually spend 30% of their disposable income on getting around. This is quite a bit. Now, enter AI, and we know that we have all of the funding in the world that you can see on the left. We see all of the companies using AI more and more. So the question that we ask ourselves, how can it help? Before we get to the answer, we should also maybe put a bit of a downer on AI, if you will, because although everybody says we're doing something, there are some limitations that we already see. So we put 3 types of numbers together. The first it's one metric on how consistently our organizations really using AI, and you can see that it's actually getting limited. In the middle, you can see what the Gen AI tools, and we'll get back to that, how they're really deployed. For the run-of-the-mill stuff, it's working quite well. For those things, for the particularly hard tasks that need to bring up new results, creativity, it's less good. And then also, we obviously all know the heavy compute creates environmental costs and so on. And you can also think about how the efficiency of the new models is increasing. So we thought this is a great time to look at it fully, to understand all of this. As part of our work, we have, again, collaborated for several months. We've consulted many experts around the world. We also had 55 organizations included in the studies. We tried to bring together all of the thinking. Maybe some of them are here today. And with this introduction, I would pass it to John to take us.
Okay, thanks, Christian. And thanks to John and the CoMotion team for inviting us to present this report today, to launch it here. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what's special about transportation as AI can be applied to it. So, I mean, first of all, we live in the real world. We live in the physical world, and transportation is dominated by the laws of physics. So that's a constraint. We have this issue of shared ownership in mobility. If we think about how mobility is delivered, it's a complex web of government and business stakeholders. So there's distributed control of the space. We have this, we know, what do we want out of transportation? Do we want to reduce CO2 emissions? Do we want to make mobility safer? Do we want to make it more affordable? Of course we want all of them. But different localities, different nations may weight those trade-offs differently. And then finally, most importantly, is the safety imperative. So if you use AI for a financial transaction, you might lose money if something goes wrong. If you use AI for a transportation transaction, you might lose your life if something goes wrong. And I think that's really sort of at the core of the criticality nature here. And for any sector, there's this foundation of communication and trust. One of our stakeholders who we interviewed, Kristen White from Google, she came to our Vision Day a month ago, and she asked people in the room, she said, okay, who here has used Gemini or a similar tool in the past 3 months? Of course, everybody raised their hand. And then she said, okay, keep your hand up. Who here would trust those types of systems to manage our transportation system? And many of the hands went down. And this is with a transportation crowd. So trust is really fundamental. This is a couple of unique things. We have this kind of data paradox in transportation. For the past decade, we've been generating more and more data in transportation, which is great. But we have struggled to figure out a platform to aggregate that data and extract value from that data. And there's wonderful organizations. The Open Mobility Foundation is here. There are people that are trying to solve this. But that's just it. It takes people to solve this data paradox. There's challenging business models. It's hard to make money in transportation. It's hard to make money quickly in transportation. There's cultural resistance, there's regulatory challenges, there's issues with talent. These affect other sectors as well. So what we've learned through this process of interviewing these folks and sort of digging deep into where can AI really unlock value for society, we've come up with this framework that you can think of as a hierarchy from the task level all the way up to the system level. And we see as we move up that hierarchy, we generate more value for society, but it's also harder to implement. So let me use a very specific example here. At MIT, we've worked with the Washington, D.C. metro system for quite some time. If we think about what is task-level AI, here's an example. So this is a tweet that the Metro received several years ago. Hey, Wamada, nice pile of trash to start my morning, right? So can AI be used to analyze this tweet? And yes, indeed it can. It can detect sarcasm. It can detect that that is not a positive sentiment. And it can organize, it can extract quite a bit of data from this tweet that's actually very valuable data. And in fact, at the time, Wamada was getting more information from public tweets, if you will, than from their own customer relationship management system. So there's value to unlock in this data. That's the task level, taking a tweet and making sense of it. Then we move up to the application level. And the application level, you can take that information, you can create a kind of real-time heat map of the cleanliness of your system, and people can act on that. And then we can bring that up to the organizational level and automate the process of issuing a work order to send a cleaner or a robot to clean up the mess. It's all seamless. This is all doable, but this is now getting harder. And then ultimately, we move up to the system level. And I think, we've talked about that a lot here at CoMotion, this concept of, sensing cities. If WMATA had interfaces with Uber, with Via, with the other transportation providers in the Washington, D.C. area, that creates a whole new sort of unlocks quite a bit of value. This is tough, though, because this requires people to align around a common vision. So there's another concept in AI, just to share, to ground the discussion, this concept of the jagged frontier, which is simply to say that AI does some of these tasks, some of these functions better than people do, and it does some functions and tasks worse, right? You're driving down the highway, you see this sign. Does it affect your driving? Of course not. Does it affect the ability of an autonomous system to interpret this sign? Of course not. You're driving down the highway and you see this sign. It doesn't affect your driving, but it might affect the autonomous system. This is the concept of the jagged frontier. And what happens is that the frontier moves out with time. So maybe this might be a problem for some AI systems now, this billboard with a stop sign, but perhaps in 2 or 3 years, it's not.
So the previous chapter from John was around making sense on how to look at mobility in AI. What we also did in the study, and not have time to go through all of these details here, we did map all of the different applications that we've seen in the entire mobility ecosystem. The first group starts around the vehicle design, the manufacturing part, typically what OEMs do, what is closest to Mate's heart and some others. The second one is around how to design mobility infrastructure. Third, fourth, and fifth is probably what operators typically do, and you can all read all of the use cases here, I'll not read them out. 6, security is probably shared responsibility between operators and cities, and the customer engagement is obviously quite an important one. So we found around 40 odd, and obviously you can group them in different ways and all of these things. Now, it should be said that coming back to the task level, the different organizational levels, those are not created equal. So you will have a mix of those here. The first thing we did is to try to make some sense again, which of those are the most prevalent in the real world. And you see quite a, I would say, fragmented picture. And then to take it one further, this is a very beautiful, very complicated page. I mean, watch out, please pay good attention. John is an academic here, he might quiz you later. So this is a picture where we try to map all of these use cases in a matrix between that we very often use, between feasibility on the x-axis and impact on the y-axis. The size of the bubbles is basically mapping what we have seen with these 55 and other organizations and how often do they use things. So maybe a few observations. The first one is you kind of can see that those things that have higher impact are not as easy to achieve as you would expect. The second thing is you would expect the big bubbles, so this is how often it's used by companies, to be further up on the top, because those are the most relevant ones, yet it's quite a mixed picture. So very likely we're going through the motions right now, and everybody's trying to figure out where we should be, what to start at first, and many of the companies we've spoken with have started with things first for reasons that are maybe not factual, that are not driven. They might be, somebody might have a certain access and so on. So we are undergoing quite through a process now. Now, how do we map where we stand now with the concepts? And to give an outlook, I give it again to John.
So if you really think about sort of what's driving change looking forward, we said, okay, maybe there's 2 buckets here. One is on the supply side, and the other's on the demand side. On the supply side, of course, is the technology and how the technology is moving so quickly. But it's also what I spoke about earlier, the ability of people to align around that common vision. Then on the demand side is how much do we really trust this technology or this AI system? So if we think about just a simple 2x2 matrix, we did a workshop with our company participants. You can think about sort of 4 basic scenarios looking forward. So what you have here are the 2 axes. You have the demand side, the trust and adoption on the bottom, and the maturity and collaboration, the technology maturity and collaboration along the y-axis. So in the first quadrant, you're looking at what we could call the golden AI age in mobility with open and interconnected platforms. In the second quadrant, you're looking at more of a walled garden. So of course, you can think of this as kind of Android versus Apple. But there's some regional implications here, and we should all be thinking about how this is playing out in different parts of the world. These first 2 scenarios are assuming that there's trust in the systems. If there's low trust, low demand, then, and of course, the technology does not progress, minimal impact. And then finally, in this 4th quadrant, this concept of skeptical consumers, here will really be cost, we think, that will drive adoption. Reduced cost will drive adoption in AI. And as I mentioned, there's this regional dimension as well. So different parts of the world are sort of juggling these priorities different. I think personally it's very exciting here in the Middle East to sort of forge sort of a new path forward on how to handle this super exciting technology. So look, just to conclude, it comes back to people. Right? I mean, this is an amazing technology. It certainly will unlock value, but how much value is dependent on to what degree we can align the complex web of stakeholders across the mobility system. And that's why I think events like this, where we bring all of those different stakeholders from cities, from business, all of them together from different parts of the world are really important to move forward into that sort of better future for mobility that we all want. So thank you.